So here we have Mortician after the gold medal. Okay. Going to do kind of a breakdown on the things that were changed in the robot, some of the stuff that worked well, some of the stuff that didn't work well, and kind of go over future plans for what I'm doing here. First off, the repairs to the frame, although they might look a little janky in the way things are done, the frame held together really well. So we both delivered and took some really big hits. We did some things that would normally stretch or twist a frame, and everything is exactly in the same spot where it's supposed to be. It held together structurally really well, and some of those hits were pretty intense. The hell of a fight! Okay? Right. The only real damage that we took from the event came on this side right here, because this drive setup got tossed into the arena rail a couple times, both from us spinning away from our own hits and then from being delivered against the arena rail by the opponent. So you can see the damage from being hit up against the rail. Now, the bent rim these are kind of flimsy, that's not that big a deal, but the hit was hard enough here that it actually collapsed in the mount for the drive motor and gearbox. Okay? If you compare that to the one on the other side, this isn't damage free, it's a little bowed in, but this is mostly what it's supposed to look like. Now you look at it on this side and you can just see how twisted everything is. This whole setup was pushed in quite a ways, and in fact, I'm sure it was pushed in far enough that the back of the motor probably clobbered the weapon gearbox. In fact, you can even see how it's kind of in there at an angle now. So this whole system was hit pretty hard. Interestingly, I was really impressed with how well the Waiachi gearbox held up, because that's a type of a hit that would potentially shatter a gearbox, and everything works exactly like it's supposed to. So I was pretty impressed with how well they hold up in combat. So we made a few changes to Mortician for this season, some of which worked really well, some less so. So this is kind of some of those things. The biggest change that we made was going to the castle motor for the weapon system. More power, more reliability from that power. This was mostly a good change. I was happy with the power. When it spun up, this was fantastic. The problem is this runs at a different voltage than we had everything set up for before. So we had to reconfigure the power system completely to deal with the max voltage that the castle motor and speed controller could run at. So one of those things then required changing the battery system. So the battery box itself and the batteries themselves were different than what we'd ran before. So I got these hard-sided batteries and 3D printed a box that they exactly fit in. And did my math really well here, because in the final match, we had to spin and run hard for the full 3 minutes. When we were done, the batteries weren't even warm. Still were almost half charged. So we actually have more capacity than we need, which is always a good thing with a weapon robot. The motor itself is super dependable. Didn't have any issues with it at all. We used the same drive setup that we ran before, which has also proven to be fairly dependable. The only issues I really had was the castle motor runs with its own castle speed controller, and the castle speed controller is designed to be a drive controller for like a big RC car, and so it wants the control system to be different than what I need to power a weapon for a combat robot. And so I was fighting with the control aspects of this virtually non-stop to get it to work the way I want. And in fact, if you watch the matches, you can see where Justin was he'd have to feather the throttle quite a bit to get it to spin up. Once it finally spun up, and you could use the full horsepower that's there, it was impressive. So I'm both happy and slightly disappointed with how that worked. The power is fantastic, but I need probably more development time to try to get the control system to work the way I want. The output RPM of that motor is higher than the motor I had in there before, which required some changes to the gearing to the weapon. So I had to go with a really tiny gear on this end and much larger one out on the weapon to try to gear it down enough to get the appropriate output RPM on the weapon, which meant I had to rebuild new tensioners, new everything else to try to get this set up to work. It all ended up working really well, and I was pretty happy with that. And so for any sort of future use, I'm actually happy with most of this stuff, other than that initial spin up. I need to continue to fight with that a little bit. So mostly it's minor software tweaking at this point to get this back to being combat ready, and any improvements I might want to do down the road. So obviously we're talking about Mortician's damage, but we won. We caused some damage along the way too. So this is a piece out of the wedge from Who's Your Daddy, and so it was sort of viciously cut out. You can look across here. It's kind of some interesting damage to this, and it was a really big hit. Hey, you got it! Kind of a time-honored tradition for combat robotics is if you cut a part off somebody else's robot, they'll actually sign it and give it to you. So this is a pretty good war trophy right here from Who's Your Daddy 2024. Jim Yee signed it for us, the captain of the other team. So good little memento from the event. So where does that leave Mortician going forward? Well, obviously, if Robogames comes back again next year, we'll certainly rebuild and be ready to go again to defend our title. I mean, you're the returning champion. You got to come back and, show everybody who's boss. As far as other uses for it, I mean, obviously, it's hard to find somewhere to run a middleweight, so that's not really a common thing to do. We could, in fact, run it again back at BattleBots for Destructathon. I'm sure that the Mad Catter team would be happy to do that again. Right now, I'm not thinking I'm going to do that, but, who knows, down the road, we'll find some reason to use the robot again. So, I don't know. For right now, I've got a few things I'm certainly going to address and fix and have the robot ready to go. And then we'll see. If Robogames returns next year, we'll be ready to go back and defend the title, and if that doesn't happen, we'll figure out somewhere else. You might see it back in the arena for BattleBots.